What's up everyone, this is Tom. Welcome back to another video. In this one, it's a photography tutorial. What I'm going to be showing you how to do is levitation photography. This sort of really easy technique that you can pretty much use for a whole variety of shots. In my example, I'm using these sort of Scrabble tiles, these letter tiles, but you can really use this for a lot of different levitation photography. It is a style that is almost entirely inspired by a photographer called David Wallace, at David Wallace Shoots over on Instagram. So definitely check him out. He does a lot of this sort of style of photography, and I absolutely love it. It's always a favorite when it pops up in my feed. You only really need two things to make this happen. You need access to an editing software, something like Adobe Photoshop, and you need a camera that can be manually focused. So manually set focus on, and bonus if you have a lens that you can stop down the aperture on. So for instance, I shot this photo on f1.8. That will just help with the effect because you're obviously going to get a more blurry sort of atmospheric background. The only other things you're going to need for the shoot is you need something that you're going to levitate. As I mentioned, for me, this was these Scrabble tiles. Then you're going to need some string or some fishing line, really anything that you can sort of hold out in front of your camera lens and stick the thing you're levitating to. And you need some blue tack or some tape that will actually stick these to the line. And then obviously what we're going to be doing is photoshopping out that line in Photoshop. So once we've got those three things ready, what you can do is start sticking your Scrabble tiles or the thing you are levitating to the fishing line or the string using the blue tack. For me, I actually did this whilst I was on the shoot because I knew that they would just sort of fall off in my bag, but it will depend on the item that you are levitating. Then what you're going to have to do is take two different photographs. Oh, and this is going to be a bunch easier to shoot if you have a tripod because you can just set it up anywhere. Otherwise, just use a wall or just sort of leave your camera in one place between the two photographs that we're going to take. So for the first photo, what you're going to need to do is put your subject in frame, someone that you're going to have sort of like blurring out the hand, as you can see from my photo. So what you're going to do is you're going to set a focus point and have it focusing fairly close to the camera lens. Then you can have your subject sort of stand in and take an out of focus, sort of blurry photo as if they've just thrown something at the camera. Then just come out of frame and take another few photographs of you holding that line in front of your camera lens. It doesn't really matter if your hands are in the shot, etc., because you're going to rub all of that out in Photoshop, but just make sure there is space between these Scrabble tiles or your levitation object and your hands if that is the case. Hold on to the string from a few different angles, get a few photos to make sure that you get sort of just a variety of shots to choose from. For my example, as you can see, I actually tried to do it initially using the string and trying to get the full word. This didn't actually really work, so I just split up the words. I did Tom and then Rich separately, and you'll find that a lot easier to do. And then you can just repeat the process when we're editing in post, as I will show you in a second. So now you've got those photos, let's jump into Photoshop and I'll show you how it's done. Okay, so I have the three files marked out here. As you can see, I've got a photo with me sort of blurred out in the background as if I'm throwing something. Then I have the first sort of me holding out the tiles and the other word. And as you can see, we'll just be cutting around here. So it doesn't really matter that I've got my other hands. And we'll just repeat the process that we do for the first tiles with the second set of tiles. So let's open up this image here, open this up in Photoshop. Let's assume we're pretty happy with the crop at the moment. What we need to do is just drag in the other image over the top, like so. And if you shot this on a tripod, it should sort of sit over the top fairly well. You can press enter and that will place that there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go down here and click add layer mask. Now simply drop the opacity on this layer ever so slightly, and then we'll go over to here to the eraser brush, bump that up, bump the hardness up as well, and then we can select the mask again, bump up the size, and now we can just sort of rub out all of the areas that don't contain those Scrabble tiles or the object that you are levitating. This can be fairly rough until you get around the actual sort of subject itself. There we go. Now we can sort of zoom in and enlarge this, hold space, and you can drag around the canvas, and you can see that the only bit of this image is going to be the Scrabble tiles. That's the only thing that we want in the final composition. So now what we can do is click the eraser tool and really bump this down. So let's bump the size down to sort of a maybe a 50 pixel size, and we can just drop the hardness again to maybe about a 30%, and we're going to start sort of going around the outline of our Scrabble tiles. The nice thing about these tiles is because they are straight edges, I can click here and then click the other side and keep it as a sort of a fairly soft-ish brush, but by holding shift it goes in a straight line from where you click in between those 2 points, so it will sort of automatically start rubbing out the lines for you. The objective here is obviously to remove all of the other areas of the photograph, most predominantly the string, because the background hopefully is similar, so the color fringing and things like that will actually be consistent between the 2 photos. The string is the most important thing that you need to remove. So let's just go ahead and do this for the first few Scrabble tiles. So once you've sort of kind of done the first tile, you can bump up that opacity and sort of zoom out and see how that might look. And as you can see, that's already looking pretty decent. And then you just repeat that process for the other tiles and then just remove the peripheral area. So I'm just going to do that and then we'll just speak. Now we've sort of outlined all of our subject, we can go through with a harder brush now that we've sort of separated the edges and just rub out all of that peripheral area of the sort of overlay photograph. And as you can see, that's already looking pretty good. So now let's insert the other photograph and just repeat that process with that one as well. Okay, so we'll drag this photograph in as like before, press enter to place it, go down here, click layer mask, make sure that we have a pretty big and hard brush applied, a razor brush, and then we can just, I'll just drop this opacity to make this a bit easier to see, but then we can just cut around all of the area that doesn't contain the actual subject. And I'll just speed through cutting those tiles out in the same way. Okay, again, once we've done that sort of rubber halo around it, we can just increase that brush size, increase the hardness, and then sort of go around it to give it our final effect. If you want to make sure the selection is totally accurate, what you can do is hold command, and click on the layer mask, and you can see where it's actually selected on your mask. As you can see, the only little bit for me remaining to do down here is this little bit here, so we'll just do that, then deselect it, do it again, and you can see that that is gone. Now we can bump up our opacity, and you get the sort of final effect, as you can see. So now you can actually play around with these as individual layers and even give them a bit of a sort of a rotation or that type of thing. Just to sort of finish this off, I'm actually going to create a new group by pressing Command G on these layers. I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to rasterize that group. I'm going to merge that group, and then I'm going to give it a little bit of a blur filter, a little bit of a lens blur, just to sort of just kind of add to the realism of the effect. Not very much at all, just probably a lens blur of maybe about 10, something like that. We can hide that other group and even scale this down ever so slightly, just again so it looks a little bit more realistic. Now what we can do is just throw a grade or preset over the entire image. I like to do that with composite images where you're sort of putting an image into another one. It just, an overall grade sort of really helps the vibe and the feel the same between all of the layers. There we have it, guys. Not an all that scary effect, as I'm sure you can agree. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video and or found it helpful. It'd be great to see some of your photos if you do attempt this technique, so hit me up on Twitter or Instagram with those. As always, I will be responding to comments or questions or suggestions in the comments down below, and I will catch you next time.